A lot of theists seem to think that atheism is irrational, although it's pretty clear that they have no clue what atheism is, nor what rationality is, so really, what the hell does it matter? This time through, we're going to watch a tactic that I haven't really looked at before. They're going to call us names because we're not giving in to their impotent threats. Yeah, that makes sense. So away we go. So today, we're going to go have a look at a short segment of what I can only assume is a much larger show. This is from a channel called the John Ankenberg Show, and John, I'm sorry to say, he's got some pretty significant issues. Actually, the more I think about it, he's got absolutely all of the issues, because not one thing he actually says in this video is reasonable or rational or even remotely true. But the religious don't seem to care about that, do they? They'd rather just believe blindly and play in their farcical fantasy land than just have a rational discussion and deal with the evidence at hand. Because who the hell needs evidence when you've got faith, right? Certainly not John. And that's a problem. So let's get to it.
One other comment, the reason of the uniqueness of creation is there is a part of you and me that isn't just chemicals, that isn't just molecules. There is soul or spirit, and that's why we have human responsibility, and that's why we have such a thing as a moral sense. It is all traceable to God.
Well, that's your claim. How about you back that up with any kind of objective evidence? And we see this kind of thing all the time. The religious, who are really only making content for other religious people, are just repeating their blind faith as though it was demonstrably true. The issue here is, it isn't. It never is. There is no evidence of any kind, no objectively demonstrable evidence anyhow, that any of these things are actually so. It's all just wishful thinking on the part of the theists. It's not something they should be proud of. If a flat earther, for example, comes up to you and says the planet is flat, any rational person would ask them to prove it. Yet the religious are not rational people. They all buy into the same kind of absurd, unevidenced nonsense, and therefore nobody is going to stop our theists and ask them to back up their own claims, because they can't do it and they don't care. It's, once again, why they don't actually want to talk to atheists. They'll talk at us, they'll talk about us, they'll make up stories about the things they think we're doing in their heads, but they're incapable of having an intelligent conversation with us, because the things they believe are not rational.
If I might just put a fine point on what you've said, atheism actually is irrational.
Right.
Now, most atheists don't know that, and in a moment I'm going to explain why I think there are so many atheists. Okay.
Right.
Almost certainly because you don't have the slightest idea what atheism is. That too is no surprise, because most theists haven't got a clue what the hell they're talking about. Someone pointed this out to me recently, that the kinds of videos I do on YouTube, those are a comedy act all their own. If you were trying to do a comedic presentation for atheists, all you have to do is set up a screen and show the religious parts of my videos, and the audience would be rolling in the aisles. Why? Because the religious are absurd in their reasoning, and I use that word very, very loosely. It's just painfully ridiculous when you think about it. And they don't seem to recognize the stupidity in the words that are coming out of their mouths either. It's not just misinformed, because you can correct misinformation. It's downright stupidity. You can't fix dumb with reason because the dumb people simply aren't interested in changing their minds. They don't have a clue what rationality is. So before he makes an even bigger fool of himself, and we know he's going to do that, let's talk about it. According to the dictionary, rationality means the quality of being based on or in accordance with reason or logic. And that's not what the religious are doing, is it? Their entire position is based on childish emotion. They believe because they want it to be true. Not because it is, not because they have any way to prove it, because they want it. They believe because it makes them happy. They don't care if there's any good reason to believe. They just do it because fifis make them content. And that's childish. It really is. And they just don't care.
But back to your question now. Okay, here's a repairman who comes to our home, and of course I'm telling him about Jesus and all those things.
And the only thing you're accomplishing is making him hate you. He's here to do a job. That doesn't grant you permission to try to change his beliefs. He's not here so you can preach at him about stupid stuff. He's there to fix whatever it is you happen to need fixed. But it's a problem with a lot of theists if you notice. They are completely without comprehension of the proper time and place to push their beliefs, because to them, all of the time is the time for them to be annoying religious gets. They don't care. Nobody asked them for their input on matters spiritual. Nope. They have a distinct lack of comprehension because they just don't care and they're not that bright. They are convinced, wrongly, that everyone wants to hear their delusional drivel every second of the day. And they're wrong. They really are. I mean, I've been through this numerous times, and no amount of kind disagreement will shut these people up. I've been standing at the checkout at the grocery store only to have some mindless moron come up behind me and try to preach at me, completely out of the blue. To paraphrase George Carlin, these are the people who can't help but mention Jesus 147 times in a 2-minute conversation. They don't get the hint that you're not interested, because they don't care if you're interested or not. You can't politely tell them to go away. Eventually, you have to just tell them to get the fuck out of your face, and then they act like you kicked a puppy. These people are fucking children. They really are. And I don't know that John Ankenberg here is much better.
And he says, if there's a God, I want to go to hell if that's where he sends me, and I want to defy him for all of eternity.
Well, considering the utter douchebag that you follow, that's not an irrational position to take. But the religious really are suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, if you notice. They have been forced to consider their God as a force of good for so long, even though no one in their right mind would ever actually think that was so. That now they see the moral monster that they bow down to as something they ought to be proud to worship. The deity they follow, they really only do so because they're afraid of him. Ask most of them, and they'll tell you that. God can kick your ass, so you better do what he says or else. That, as I keep saying, is absurdly childish. It's like saying the Germans in World War II should have followed Hitler because he had the power to kill them. It's an end you don't want, so throw your morality out the window and do what you're told, or else. And that's really dumb. There are things worth dying for, whether you like it or not. There are things worth suffering for, whether you like it or not. The God of the Bible is morally reprehensible. Nobody in their right mind should ever assent to its control. And if you are, you're dumb.
And I said to him, you have that choice. And you probably have lots of company. But I said, I just want you to think for a moment of how absolutely foolish that is.
No, it's not. It's foolish to follow a moral monster just because they have the power to make you suffer. And that's really all the religious are doing when you think about it. It's why we get the questions about, if God could be proven real, would you bow down and worship him? And the answer to that question is very simple. Hell no. It's really two separate questions jammed into one. If God could be proven to be real, if the Bible could be shown to be historically and scientifically accurate, etc., would I believe that the God that was described and the God that was demonstrated actually existed? Yes, absolutely I would. There's no way to deny that. But there's an entirely separate question than whether God is real or not. It's if that God is worthy of my worship and my admiration. Has he earned it? And I say, no, he hasn't. In fact, he's earned my hatred if any of the things that are said about this God are actually so. God needs to be worth bothering with, and according to the Bible, he simply isn't. And this goes for any God of any kind. It goes for anything. First, you need to prove that this thing is real. God, leprechauns, Santa Claus, you name it, it doesn't matter. And the requirements are all the same. We do no double standards. If someone proved that Santa Claus was real tomorrow, I will believe that Santa Claus is real tomorrow. But that doesn't mean I'm going to bow down and worship him. He hasn't proven himself worthy. Power is not worthiness. Living your life in fear is stupid.
Why defy a God who is frightening? The Bible says that he's a consuming fire. It is a fearful thing to fall into his hands unprepared. So why defy God when he has provided a way of escape from his wrath?
Because God is a dick. It's like saying, why defy Hitler when he's provided you a way to escape from his wrath? Just shovel Jews into a gas chamber, it's not that hard. Yeah, are you really so stupid that you'd actually do that? Yeah, don't answer that question because I think we already know. The things your imaginary friend demands that we do, they are so morally reprehensible that no one with half a brain or anything resembling a refined moral sense should ever do any of it for any reason. That explains a lot, though, doesn't it? These people aren't using their brains, and according to them, just ask them, their morals all come from this moral monster. It's no wonder they don't know any better. It's 100% emotional and delusional. They are afraid of God. This guy said so himself. And that's why they're willing to do anything that this moral monster wants them to do, because they're terrified of the consequences if they don't. And that's just childish, it really is. It's why kids hand over their lunch money to bullies, because they're afraid of getting beat up if they don't. But adults, rational adults anyhow, they know how to stand up for themselves. They put their foot down and they refuse to cross the moral line. If that gets them killed, well, okay, it's unfortunate, but that happens. There are things more important than a comfortable life. It's just that the religious can't get that simple fact through their tiny little brains. And that's sad.
Yep.
You run to Jesus, and in a moment I'll talk about Jesus and explain why people should do that. But John, it's so irrational. And I said to him, well, I guess you could have a rowboat that takes on an aircraft carrier, and tries to sink an aircraft carrier.
Right.
Is God going to say, oh, there's this person in hell who is defying me?
No, because from every shred of evidence that we have, your imaginary friend isn't real. So no, almost certainly there are no actual consequences to defying your magical father figure in the sky, because from the evidence that we have, there's nothing actually there. I don't care how much you want to think that there is. It only matters if there actually is, and you've got no way whatsoever to prove that to our satisfaction. So all of this is just an empty threat, and I'm willing to bet people are just making fun of you. I would be, because you're being dumb. You really are. Yet the religious seem to have a problem understanding that. They think people are serious in their responses to the lunatic theists. And I'm sorry, but we're just not. At least I'm not. I can't speak for anyone but myself. It is really difficult to have any kind of intelligent discussion with people who are talking about their crazy sky daddy nonsense. It's like trying to have a credible discussion with a flat earther or a UFO abduction fanatic. These people are simply out of their gourds. And that goes for John Ankenberg too.
God is God and you're not. And he can do whatever he likes. And what I'm glad about is that he mercifully has given us a way of escape from hell.
You mean that place he purposely condemned us to because your God is a douchebag? I know I've made this point before, but this asshole deity made us purposely so that we couldn't follow his rules, because he knew before he did it how absolutely everything would turn out. And the Bible is a long and comedic history of God's utter fuck-ups over time. Talk about incompetence, but this loser deity of his thought that the best solution to temporal crimes that we committed because we were simply incapable of avoiding them because he was a dick, the only solution is to be roasted for all eternity in a lake of fire, or however the individual Christian decides to interpret the whole thing. How dumb is that? I mean, George Carlin had a great bit on that.
And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish, where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you.
So why not take that rather than spend the rest of your life defying him?
For one, there's no evidence of any kind that any of this nonsense is true in the first place. It's like asking John why he's not accepting the kind offer of the Hindu god Yama to avoid the 28 Hindu hells. If you ask this guy that question, he wouldn't have an answer because he's never even considered the possibility. He knows nothing about Hinduism, or probably any other religion besides his own, and he's only adopted his own because A, it was shoved into his head at an early age before he had the rational capacity to think about it critically, and I don't think he's ever gotten that, or B, it makes him feel good, and he's not very good at considering his faith intellectually, because none of these people got to their beliefs through intellectual means. It's all feelings, zero facts. They don't care. It's why none of this stuff makes a lick of sense, because they're not at all concerned. They like the idea of a god, and therefore they insist that a god is real so that they can stroke their overactive egos. And that's really, really stupid. I don't know how else to put it. But they also couldn't care less if any of it makes any sense, because fifis, you know? This is stupid, because thinking is hard and feeling, that's simple. And these are simple people. So he thinks we're taking him seriously, which we're not by and large. He thinks that his bald assertions hold any weight at all, which they don't. And he's stricken with Stockholm Syndrome and assumes everyone else should be just like him. And we're not. We're just not. There is something severely wrong with this guy. Unfortunately, he's not alone. There are lots of different people in lots of different irrational belief systems, religious and otherwise, who are all just like he is. But that's not us. We're not shivering in our booties over the impotent threats of irrational people. We're laughing at you. You need to get help. serious psychological help. This is not how intelligent people behave. This is how immature children act. And these people have problems. They really do. Please do everyone around you a favor and try to grow up. Try to find some kind of maturity. Anything at all. We're not that picky at this point. Anything you can do, it can only help.
Bum